I am finally getting around to reviewing Jude the Obscure for you guys. Here we are, and that is what this video is for. So, to be honest, though, it's not really worth reading, and I mean, if anything, the only thing that would maybe make it worth your while would be the ending, just because the ending is so shocking. And spoiler alert ahead of time, I am totally going to talk about the ending, because if anything, that is the only thing worth talking about in regards to this book. Generally speaking, for those of you who don't want to know about the ending, it starts out very slow, and you're just like, okay, let's move on. Like, the first few chapters feel like a lifetime of just stuff you don't care about. The language is, it's an easy read, so that's good. Maybe, I don't know. It's an easy read. You can breeze through it. It's not difficult to understand. It's not any intense language or anything like that, but it's just kind of boring and like sad, but in a discouraging way. Like, not sad as in tragic, which is beautiful, but sad in like, this is just depressing. Like, I don't want to read about this, you know? Like, and you want to root for him because you're like, yeah, underdog, but it has a lot to do with the times. Although I will hand it to this book that it is actually quite realistic, which is probably why not very many people would like reading it, but it's very real. Like, in many books, like during these times, you like, oh, happy ending, or the main character overcomes the odds, or the beat society, or whatever, like they climb the ladder and they make it. But in this one, he doesn't make it. That's not really a spoiler if you think about it, because you don't really entirely know what I'm talking about. Anyways, but it's realistic in a very, oh yeah, there's that. It's unfortunate, but it makes sense. Like, this is the kind of stuff that would happen to people all the time. So the main character, Jude, is obviously the main character. Anyways, Sue and Arabella are the other two women whose lives he gets entangled with, or whatever. Sue is actually his cousin. He ends up falling in love with her. The only reason he married Arabella was because she basically tricked him into marrying her. She lied about being pregnant, and at that time, obviously the right thing to do was to marry. So that it was out of wedlock, technically it was, but whatever. So, and she's actually kind of just like a terrible person, and it's like this big, it comments a lot. It has a lot to say about marriage, like the institution of marriage, and what society thinks of it versus what you think of it, versus what the church says about it, the church says about it, all of that, and how all of those intermingle and do or can and cannot reside together. So it has a lot to say about that. It attacks both societies and the church's institutional versions of marriage, or like the rules, what is and is not appropriate. And one of the ways it does that is that with Jude and Sue, they are very much in love, and you're like, great, as long as they have each other, they're doing fine. I mean, yeah, they struggle financially, but that's to be expected in a time like this, unless you're born into a wealthy family, which is another reason why this is so real. However, that is interesting. Okay, I'll give it that. Aside from the ending, it does have a lot to say about marriage, and it's great. I like it. I'm like, dang, that really makes you think. because they're in love, but everyone, literally everyone in society, people even turn them away. Like, they try to find a place to live a couple times. People turn them away because they aren't actually married, yet they have these children. So that says a lot about what society thought of marriage at that time. And it's kind of very much wrong. Okay, now I'm gonna talk about the ending, because that's really my only favorite part in the book and what I like most about it. So if you don't want to know the ending, just skip the rest of this. Jude and Sue have been living together for quite some time, for a couple years I think at this point in time, and they had 2 children together, and then one of the eldest son is actually Jude and Arabella's. He's called Little Time because although he's a child, obviously he's actually very thoughtful and wise, like unusually so for a child. Like a child, he's also very he isolates himself. He thinks a lot, very deeply. He thinks dark things, not dark as in like murderous or anything, but dark as in no child at least should be thinking like this. It's more something like an adult in their 30s or 40s would think, because their lives are just terrible. This child, he's very he's, I don't want to say pessimistic or cynical, but it's like he's very sober-minded, and he understands a lot, and he's interesting. He's probably my favorite character. Anyways, so he is my favorite character because I don't really like anyone else except for the teacher. I feel bad for him. I would totally love him if I were Sue. Okay, so Sue, I'm sorry, I keep going off on tangents. So Sue was previously married to a school teacher who she didn't technically want to marry, and she wasn't in love with him or anything like that, but in the end she felt obligated to go back to him, and I'm like, girl, you're just making things worse for yourself, whatever. Anyways, so that school teacher, I really like him. He is a very honest man. He loves Sue, okay? And okay. Getting back to the ending, I'm sorry. Okay, so, where was I? Okay, yeah, so they're at this point in time, they've been together for a couple years, Jude and Sue, with their kids or whatever, and they decide to move back to, I want to say London, but I could be wrong, but they decide to move back to some city. However, people there know that they aren't actually married. They tried to make it seem like they were married, like they left to go get married somewhere else and then they came back, but everyone knows that they aren't actually married, and so person after person turns them down. And so finally, this one woman lets them stay upstairs. Well, she lets Sue and the kids stay upstairs. She lends them that place, whereas she tells Jude that he has to stay somewhere else, that he can't stay with them, which is just stupid, but I guess she felt bad for, you know, obviously a mother and her children. So Jude goes off to go, you know, find a place of his own, a room of his own, at least for the night. And during that time, the landlady who they're staying with or whatever, her husband comes home, and they get into an argument about, you know, them staying there, and that gets obviously Little Time and Sue talking, I guess technically his stepmother or assumed mother, and they have a very real conversation. Sue is actually very honest with him. I found it. Oh my gosh, you guys. Okay, so okay, I found it. They have a very serious conversation about like parenthood and the responsibilities of it, and it takes a turn. Like he starts basically like, children are a burden. Like, we're a burden to you guys. You obviously can't. It's like, and he's also like, but we didn't ask to be born either. So and I totally relate to him. Okay, I thought these things. Like, when my parents split for the first time, I was like, why are we here? Like, why did y'all decide to have kids? What made you think this was a good idea? 1, 2, we didn't ask for this. 3, it's, so I can totally like relate to him. But anyways, they're having this conversation. And, Sue. He's like, can I do anything? She says, no, all is trouble, adversity, and suffering. Father went away to give us children room, didn't he? Partly. It would be better to be out of the world than in it, wouldn't it? It would almost, dear. 'Tis because of us children too, isn't it, that you can't get a good lodging? Well, people do object to children sometimes. Then if children make so much trouble, why do people have them? Oh, because it's a law of nature. But we don't ask to be born. No, indeed. And what makes it worse with me is that you are not my real mother, and you needn't have had me unless you liked. I oughtn't to have come to thee. That's the real truth. I troubled them in Australia, and I trouble folk here. I wish I hadn't been born. You couldn't help it, my dear. I think that whenever children be born that are not wanted, they should be killed directly before their souls come to them, and not allowed to bring good to grow big and walk about. Sue didn't reply. And then a little more talking later, she confesses to him that he's actually pregnant, and all that. And it says, the boy burst out weeping. Oh, you don't care, he cried in bitter reproach. However could you, mother, be so wicked and cruel as this when you needn't have done it till we was better off and father well? He's basically mad at her for the fact that she's pregnant, because like, what situation is this to have a child in? And I'm like, dude, you are so right and real right now. Like, y'all have no idea how much I relate to this. To bring us all into more trouble. No room for us, and a father forced to go away, and we turned out tomorrow, and yet you be going to have another one of us soon? 'Tis done a purpose, 'tis. She heard him say, if we children was gone, there'd be no trouble at all. I relate so hard to this. Or related, I guess. I have shared similar thoughts. So I 100% like understand. But you guys, this is what happens. This is the ending. So she goes away to talk to Jude and figure things out, and then she comes back. Both her and Jude come back, actually. They find him and the other children dead. What he did was he hung his 2 younger half-siblings, so the children that Jude and Sue had together, he hung them, or he strangled them, one of those. He basically killed them. And then he hung himself, and he wrote a note. Oh gosh, I should have left that marked. Yeah, okay, he wrote a note. Oh, done because we are too many. Done because we are too many. You don't hear a lot, especially in like literature, at least that I know of, that I've read, about children killing themselves and their siblings. And for reasons such as this, like those are very, I think another reason why it's so shocking is because it makes sense. Like, that sounds terrible to say, but it's totally true. Like, it makes sense why he did that. That doesn't necessarily make it okay, but it makes sense. It's almost like, this is completely different, but it made me think of A Modest Proposal by, who was it, Jonathan Swift? It's a 100% satirical letter saying, oh, we have too many children and we're, going through a famine and we can't feed people. Why not just eat the children? So there's less mouths to feed. And then the children that we do eat, they can like feed everyone else. No one starves, And the reason why it was so controversial and so effective, I mean, that didn't happen obviously, but it was because that totally makes sense. Like, no one's gonna do it because we're not trying to be cannibals or anything. That'd be like murder, but I mean, it makes sense. And he does have a point. I'm grateful it didn't like happen, and it did its job, I think. So, but yeah, this just made me think of that, and yeah, this is getting really long. I'm sorry, this is a long review, but I feel a lot about that ending, and it's just, yeah. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys like this. I guess I will see you guys in my next video.